For us, as First Nations, the relationship with the land is always one of our most important principles of life. Stewardship of the earth consistently guides our decisions both as individuals and as leaders. Our traditional cultural belief and knowledge holds that land and life are seen as a whole and must be protected at all costs, out of respect for the past, present, and future generations. We hold ourselves responsible for the protection and preservation of the natural elements in which we live. The Creator has given us the responsibility to ensure that our use of the natural elements must be sustainable and based on responsible decision-making. Unfortunately, what we see as we examine the historical record of the natural environment of northern Manitoba is frequently quite the opposite. We take note of considerable damage to our environment, and all in the name of progress. Let me give you some quotations of some very well-known Aboriginal leaders. Chief Tecumseh expressed our concerns in these words. There the forests of untold years have been hewn down and cast into fire. There the buffalo and deer, fowl and fish are all gone. There the woodland birds whose sweet songs once pleased your ears have forsaken the land never to return, and the wild flowers which your maidens loved to wear have all withered and died. Chief Tecumseh added words of concern about the perpetrators, who now also include us, when he said, "You must bear in mind these strangers are not as you. They are devoid of natural affection, loving gold or gain better than one another or their own souls." Chief Seattle of the Duwamish tribe in Washington, after whom the city of Seattle is named, echoed the words of Chief Tecumseh when he said in a well-known speech on ecology that destiny is a mystery to us, for we do not understand when the buffalo are all slaughtered, the wild horses are tamed, the secret corners of the forest heavy with the scent of many men, and the view of the ripe hills blotted by talking wires. Where is the thicket? Gone. Where is the eagle? Gone. The end of living and the beginning of survival. Our own Chief Dan George, who is so familiar to us as the chief of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, a Coast Salish band whose Indian reserve is located on Burrard Inlet in the southeast area of the district of North Vancouver, British Columbia. Chief George was also an author, a poet, and an Academy Award-nominated actor. The time will soon be here when my grandchild will long for the cry of a loon, the whisper of spruce needles, or the screech of an eagle. But he will not make friends with any of these creatures, and when his heart aches with longing, he will curse me. Have I done all to keep the air fresh? Have I cared enough about the water? Have I left the eagle to soar in freedom? Have I done everything I could to earn my grandchild's fondness? Quatsina's hereditary chief Edward Moody of the Nusalt Nation, BC, who died in 2010. We must protect the forest of our children, grandchildren, and children yet to be born. We must protect the forest for those who can't speak for themselves, such as the birds, animals, fish, and trees. And finally, a prophetic quotation from our own Cree tradition, of which I am a part and whose beliefs I share totally. These very poignant words: when all the trees have been cut down, when all the animals have been hunted, when all the waters are polluted, when all the air is unsafe to breathe, only then you will discover you cannot eat money. The industrial and economic potential of northern Manitoba includes largely mining, fishing, forestry, and the production of hydroelectric power. It would be fair to say that Aboriginal peoples see their future to be inextricably linked to a strengthened relationship with the land and resource-based economy. There is no doubt that the development and extraction practices of the past, and also to a large extent the present, have seriously damaged the environment of northern Manitoba, not only in the Boreal forest area, but also in the vast areas of tundra in our traditional territories. At the same time, it is certainly true that our communities have not received the proportionate benefits from those developments. As a leader, I am faced with a number of challenges and realities: shortages of housing, the need for upgraded infrastructure, and funding for education, social and economic development, and most importantly, access to quality health care, needs that should be addressed by those benefits. My own experience in Norway Cree Nation traditional territory on both branches of the Nelson River, where most of the water for the basic production of electrical power by Manitoba Hydro for both domestic use and export constantly flows day after day, illustrates how badly we have treated the land provided by the Creator. The Nelson River in our traditional territory has caused and is causing permanent ecological damage, both to the land and the fishing resource base, resulting in permanent and sustained socio-economic damages in our community. Current scientific findings throughout the world show clearly that economic development has had a very serious negative effect on climate change, with very significant ecological damage both in the short and long term. I also realize fully the very significant changes that have occurred in our communities as we have adjusted to the influence of economic development. It has influenced our families, our spiritual health, and our capacity to maintain fully healthy communities. It is clear to us as Aboriginal leaders that we have not fully benefited from the development of hydro, mining, and forestry. Our challenge today as Aboriginal leaders is to take advantage of our economic opportunities, but also address the challenge of ecological damage. As leaders, we must apply our traditional knowledge, our influence, and our leadership on the protection of our environment, but also ensure its sustainability for our communities and our people, especially our children and grandchildren. It is very important that we begin to embrace Aboriginal perspectives of how this can be done. We must take greater legitimate control of development on our traditional territories. We must exercise our treaty rights as defined by Section 35 of the Constitution. However, we must take control in a way that balances our leadership with the leadership participation of other governments as well as the private sector. We must ensure that the duty of the Crown to consult and accommodate takes place in such a way that it does not drag on forever without any resolution, thus preventing development, but produces solutions that work to the advantage of all parties and also ensures sustainability for our communities. We must develop strong, high-capacity working partnerships with other governments and with the private sector that are based on mutual respect, the use of best practices, political strength, and fully defined common agendas upon which to base our initiatives in our traditional territories. We must ensure that, as we work with the private sector in the development of resources, that we always have properly and legally negotiated benefits agreements. These agreements must produce benefits throughout the entire cycle of development and not only at the concluding part of the cycle. The agreements must also always build Aboriginal capacity at all levels. We must ensure that our traditional values and our respect for the wholeness relationship between our people and the land is fully recognized and respected by any and all partners, be they other governments or the private sector. We must ensure that we as leaders are fully informed of the economic potential of the resources on our traditional territories, and they use the best practices available to make decisions about sustainable and responsible development of these resources. We must ensure that we have access to our traditional lands that have high mineral potential, as much of our traditional lands are not fully explored and are also subject to actions on environmental protection and thus not necessarily available for their economic potential. We must ensure that the potential negative effects on our communities of the related economic development are identified by us and that we provide education to our young people and build capacity to combat these effects. The spiritual and family life of our communities is our most important value. Like most of you, I believe in an intelligent and informed collaboration when working at common goals. I also believe firmly that when we identify agendas clearly, when we describe our respective visions, and when we come together, we can improve and increase benefits for each one of us, for our communities and our province as a whole. You are all aware of the well-known quote which says, "It is good to visit the past, and I am not sure I would still want to live there." It is a relatively easy thing to speak positively of the way things used to be and set up objectives and outcomes based upon the past and totally ignore the reality of living in today's changed world. The fact is that the world has changed. The fact is also that we, as Aboriginal peoples, have traditional lands that are full of potential, and that we as leaders have the capacity, the political will, and the knowledge to ensure a positive future for our communities. Clearly, we must all work together as Aboriginal leaders. We must provide active and politically wise leadership to ensure that our time-honored perspectives on responsible care of the environment become an essential part of all economic development in northern Manitoba. This ensures the protection and sustainability of the environment for ourselves and all future generations, especially our children and grandchildren. I must also add that the current attitude of other governments and also the private sector is on record as being willing to work collaboratively with us in the directions of which I speak to you today. Their motivation for collaborative action is prompted by their interest in sustainability, their reaction to Aboriginal legal positions and treaty rights, and their conviction that a collaborative model benefits all parties. Our perspective is based on a vision that is much larger proportion of the landscape must be maintained free of industrial activity that has been done in other parts of the world. I would also like to speak to the draft document, the Northern Manitoba Development Accord. The Accord, if implemented as written, addresses many of the areas of concern that I have noted in my remarks. These include the following: prosperity. The Boreal forest area should be managed to provide long-term benefits to all northern people and should be defined by those people and communities, and of course also by the entities who invest in it. Balance. Future plans and actions need to balance development, protection of the environment, and the leadership of both Indigenous and non-Indigenous governments. Cooperation and positive relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. However, this cooperation and positive relationships need to be seen in the full context of the rights and aspirations of First Nations communities. Community benefits. The development of the Boreal forest area should benefit the communities and the people who live there. Rights and respect. We fully agree with the statement in the Northern Accord, which states plainly the Boreal region of Manitoba lies within the traditional territories of numerous Indigenous nations. It is critical that all planning processes recognize and respect the various levels of Indigenous governments, cultures, and peoples. Indigenous peoples and communities need to be involved in planning as leaders and partners. It is important that this process serve to complement, not to replace, Indigenous land use planning and resource management efforts. Now is the best time to activate and prepare the structures necessary to deliver on our vision. I conclude with this. This planet, it's all we have. It sustains us. Without our care now, if we don't take action, there will be no living thing in the future, whether it be a deer, fish, bird, tree, or plant. We cannot stand by with such bleak prospects. We must act and act now. At the same time, we must live today. We must eat, have shelter, security, provide for our families, and for this we must use our resources and all of our talents, cutting-edge technologies, and the latest green practices. In no small part, this depends on global development, including resource development. Securing a future with an environment where humankind can breathe and live must be balanced with development that can be sustained. This cannot be done in isolation. It is the work of us all. We cannot move forward as Indigenous peoples alone. We cannot move forward with government alone. We cannot move forward with industry and technology alone. From the beginning, we were given the duty to care for this beautifully created place. And it is now that we must collectively come to terms with this responsibility and take seriously our work to take care of our Mother Earth.